There are moments when the world suddenly feels too loud. The voices, the traffic, the endless repetition of stories, all blending into one thick layer of noise. You sit there, surrounded by people, yet it feels as though you're somewhere else entirely. Everything around you starts to blur, leaving only your thoughts, running endlessly, colliding, then slowly dissolving into silence. And have you ever felt like you're living too deeply inside your own mind? As if the world keeps moving while you simply stand still, belonging nowhere, yet unable to leave. You listen to someone speak, but your mind drifts away. A single passing phrase makes you pause. A fleeting glance can stir something in your chest. Others continue the conversation, but you're busy analyzing every small detail, trying to understand the feeling hidden behind it. You don't mean to, it's just that your nature compels you to see more, to feel more, to think deeper. Maybe you've asked yourself, why am I like this? Why can't I be simple like everyone else? Just live, laugh, just forget. You wish you could stop thinking, stop feeling so much just to give your mind a moment of peace. But the moment you try to quiet it, your thoughts begin to speak again. Questions, memories, unsaid things, all rushing back like a wave that never rests. And so you fall silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've said too much inside your head. You watch the world pass by, and sometimes you feel like an observer, someone standing at the edge, watching, remembering, feeling. Someone who never quite keeps up with the pace of life, because inside, and you've always lived a little slower, a little deeper, a little more real. But maybe that's exactly what makes you who you are. Because without those thoughts, those feelings, those quiet moments where you look into the soul of the world, you wouldn't be the same person. A quiet spirit, but one that feels life profoundly. There are people who never truly blend into this world. They're there. They smile, they listen, they nod, but deep down their mind exists somewhere else, quiet and distant, a place no one else can reach. They listen to conversations pass them by, but instead of joining in, they're analyzing. A casual remark can stay with them for hours. A fleeting glance is enough to make them sense something left unsaid. They see more than what's shown and feel more than what's spoken. When they walk into a room, they're not the first to speak. They observe. They notice the distance between people, the strained smile on someone's face, the subtle shift in the air when silence falls. To them, everything carries meaning. A slight change in tone, a slowed breath, averted eyes, all of it is language. Their world isn't built from words, but from the pauses between them. And sometimes, seeing too much exhausts them. They wish they could just be ordinary. Talk about the weather, laugh when others laugh, and stop thinking afterward. But they can't. In their mind, everything has layers. They hear someone say, "I'm fine." "Am I?" But they sense the ocean beneath it. They understand, and that's precisely why they can't pretend not to. People say they overthink, but they don't know how else to exist. Thinking is how they breathe, how they stay anchored, how they keep from dissolving into the chaos of life. They can't stop analyzing, connecting, questioning why. The world moves too fast, and they slow down to see more clearly, to feel more deeply. And that's why they fall out of sync. When they speak little, people assume they're distant. When they stay silent, they're called cold or proud. But if anyone sat with them long enough, they'd see. Inside those quiet souls lies an entire universe, intricate and sincere. A world where every detail holds a story, where emotions aren't just felt, but understood, decoded, remembered. They're often the quietest in the group, yet they can feel everyone's energy. They sense who's pretending, who's hurting, who needs to be heard. They can read others' emotions, yet almost no one can read theirs. So, over time, they learn to hide that depth, because they know not everyone can handle how real it is. Sometimes they wish they could be simpler, say something shallow, laugh easily, forget the little things. But they can't, because in their mind, another voice is always asking, "Is that true? What does it mean?" That mind, sharp, intuitive, restless, is both their gift and their burden. And if you've ever felt this way, seeing too much, feeling too deeply, thinking too long, you're not strange. You're just living in a depth most people never pause long enough to reach. Maybe you stay quiet in noisy rooms, not because you don't belong, but because you see something else, something truer, more delicate, and perhaps a little sadder. And that's okay. Not everyone is born to speak endlessly. Some are born to listen, to feel, to understand. And it's often those quiet souls, the ones who dwell in silence within a noisy world, who truly see the beauty hidden beneath what everyone else calls ordinary. No one is born a deep thinker. They become one because somewhere along the way, they had to learn how to observe to survive. Maybe as a child, they realized that the world wasn't always safe. To understand others, they had to pay attention to what wasn't being said. A glance that turned cold, a heavy sigh, a sudden silence, all of it became signals. And slowly they developed a special ability to read the emotions hidden beneath the surface. When others react, they analyze. When others are sad, they wonder why. When others grow angry, they don't fight back. They quietly step aside and observe. They don't do it to control, but to feel safe. Because for them, understanding is a form of protection. And so, over time, thinking became their shield. Their mind never stops working, like a machine programmed to find causes. They think about everything, from the smallest details to the biggest questions of life. They can be in conversation, yet a part of them is busy analyzing the other person's tone, storing away tiny fragments most people would overlook. They don't know how to turn it off, because it's no longer a choice. It's instinct. But that same instinct is also what isolates them. When the world sees a single moment, it sees the whole picture behind it. When someone says, "I'm fine," they hear the ache beneath it. When someone laughs, they notice the weariness in their eyes. They read everything, yet can rarely express what they feel, because they know not everyone wants to be seen so completely. So they stay silent, not because they want to hide, but because they've grown used to not being truly heard. While others speak to release, they hesitate, wondering, will this hurt someone? They think even while talking, feel even while listening, and grow tired even while trying to seem simple. People call them the thinkers, but deep down they are just children who grew up in uncertainty. Children who couldn't rely on anyone, so they relied on observation. Children who were never given explanations, so they learned to explain everything themselves. And now, as adults, they still live that way, carrying the same survival habits, only in a different form, overthinking. They don't realize that the sensitivity that once kept them safe is now what exhausts them, because they no longer know how to stop. Their mind runs like an endless river, replaying the past, imagining the future, trying to understand everything, even when there's nothing left to understand. Yet somewhere inside those spirals lies a truth they rarely see. They don't think deeply because they're too logical, but because they're too emotional. Every thought they have is born from a feeling, a wound, a memory, a fear. They think too much because they once felt too much. And they analyze because it's the only way they know to keep from being swallowed by emotion. They live with a mind that's always awake, but a heart that's learned to guard itself. And when someone understands too much, they begin to feel distant from everything. Understanding keeps them safe, but it also makes them lonely. Because the more they see, the clearer the gap becomes between themselves and the world, between what people say and what they truly feel. And sometimes, within that loneliness, they finally see the real root of their thoughts. They think deeply not to be smarter, but to survive. Not to be different, but to feel safe. Not because they wanted to understand too much, but because once, not understanding enough was what hurt the most. The older they get, the more they realize they're living inside a circle with no way out. Just when the mind begins to quiet, a single memory, a glance, or a passing word can start it all again. They think, then question why they thought that way. They feel, then try to understand why the feeling appeared. Every thought rises and falls like a wave that never stops, and somewhere between those waves, they forget what peace ever felt like. They can sit in a cafe surrounded by the murmur of voices, but their mind are far away. One part of them still lives in the past, where unspoken words linger. Another part runs ahead to the future, worrying about things that haven't happened. And the present, the only thing that truly exists, slips by untouched. Sometimes it seems like they're living, but in truth, they're only thinking about what it means to live. They don't just feel emotions. They stand outside themselves to observe them, dissect them, explain them. As if simply feeling was no longer enough. Even a small moment of joy makes them wonder, am I truly happy? A brief sadness makes them ask, why does this hurt so much? And so everything becomes an endless reflection. They think, then think about thinking, then grow weary from the weight of it all. They try to stop, but the harder they try, the louder their mind becomes, like trying to hold back the sea with bare hands. Maybe you're caught in that same loop without realizing it, the loop of a mind that's too awake, of a heart that's too deep to rest. They know they're doing it, and that awareness exhausts them even more. Their fatigue doesn't come from the world outside, but from the noise within. They can smile, say, I'm fine, and still have 1,000 tangled thoughts running beneath the surface. When others forget, they remember. When others sleep, they replay every conversation from the day. Sometimes they wish they could stop understanding. They wish they could live lightly, simply breathe without needing a reason for each breath. But they can't. They are wired to find meaning, even in meaninglessness. And that's what makes them both profound and painfully lonely. People think they're quiet, but they're just tired of pretending to be normal. They know that if they spoke about everything happening in their head, no one would understand. So they stay silent. They learn to nod, to smile softly, to say a few polite words. They hide their truest parts, not because they want to, but because they're afraid their depth might weigh too heavily on others. And so the loop continues. They live, they observe, they understand, and then they feel empty. Each time they try to understand more, they drift a little further from themselves, because the more they understand, the less there is left to understand. The deeper they dig, the wider the emptiness becomes. They begin to see a painful truth. It's not that they think too much, it's that they feel too deeply. Thought is only the echo of emotion. Every feeling leaves a trace. They can't walk past without looking back. They carry the sadness of others, the unfinished stories, the words that were never said, as if their heart have become a refuge for everything left unspoken in the world. That's why they tire so easily, feel lonely so often, and always seem a little different. They don't understand how others can forget so quickly, can move on so easily. For them, every memory is ink. It may fade, but it never disappears. Yet maybe what hurts them most isn't that the world doesn't understand, but that they can't stop trying to understand the world. They want to know why, to connect, to feel deeply, but the deeper they go, the fewer people stay with them. And sometimes, when the night falls, they just sit quietly, staring at the lights outside the window, and think, maybe not everyone is meant to understand everything. Maybe some people are simply meant to feel, deeply, quietly, and sometimes painfully. But within that pain, there's something beautiful, because no matter how weary their mind becomes, they still choose to feel, to love, to live, even when the world does not. And then, one day, they realize some things aren't meant to be understood. Some feelings don't need to be analyzed, And some sadness doesn't need an explanation. They've spent so much of their life trying to organize the world inside their mind, trying to find reasons for everything, turning every emotion into a logical answer. But the harder they tried, the clearer it became. The world was never meant to be fully understood. It was meant to be lived, felt, and passed through. And so they begin to learn how to stop, not to stop thinking, but to stop fighting their own thoughts. They no longer force themselves to be simpler, to think less. They just sit quietly and let their mind flow like water. They understand now that when you try to dam the river, it only rushes harder. But when you let it flow, it finds its own way. They learn to accept that they are deep thinkers, and there's nothing wrong with that. Their depth is not a burden, it's the way they see the world. It's the reason they can find beauty in what others overlook. A wistful gaze, a sincere word, a quiet afternoon. They don't need to fix themselves. They only need to stop judging who they are. So they begin to speak more gently, think more slowly, and live more honestly. When the mind starts spinning its questions, they no longer panic. They simply observe and smile, as if watching a curious child who can't stop asking, why? They let things come and go without clinging, without chasing. They realize that peace doesn't come from having every answer, but from accepting that some questions don't need answers at all. They no longer need clarity in everything or understanding from everyone. They just need to feel a slow breath, a real moment, a second of being fully themselves. Gradually, life begins to feel different. The world is still the same, loud, hurried, shallow. But something inside them has shifted. They no longer react. They observe. They no longer search for meaning in everything. They simply experience it. They no longer try to understand people. They just love them, gently. When someone hurts them, they don't analyze it anymore. They just feel the sadness, then let it drift away. When joy arrives, they don't question it. They just smile and let it fill them. They stop overthinking, stop blaming, stop finding fault in themselves. And perhaps the most important realization of all, they no longer need to run from their depth, because it was never the enemy. It only felt heavy when they tried to make it something else. Once they allowed it to simply exist, everything became lighter. They still think deeply, but now each thought feels like a breath. They still feel intensely, but without fear. They still analyze the world, but no longer let it consume them. And in that balance, they finally find what they've been seeking all along. Not silence, but peace within the noise. Maybe depth isn't about understanding everything. It's about learning how to live with what can't be understood. It's not about making the world less complex, but about realizing that even its complexity carries its own kind of beauty. When they begin to learn how to live with their mind instead of fighting it, everything quietly starts to change. The world is still loud, people are still rushing, and inside them, their thoughts never truly fall silent. But one thing is different. They're no longer afraid of themselves. They understand now that their thoughts are not enemies. They are waves, rising, falling, coming, going. There's no need to fight them, only to watch, to let them dissolve into space on their own. Once, they wanted to fix themselves, to think less, to be simpler, to be normal. But now, they no longer wish to be anyone else. They choose to accept themselves as they are, with every layer of thought, emotion, and contradiction. They realize that their depth doesn't make them wrong or weak. It simply makes them human, and the more they allow that truth to exist, the lighter they feel. They learn to step into the world without needing to understand it. They watch others talk, laugh, live superficially, and instead of judging, they smile. They know everyone has their own way of surviving. They stop trying to make others see, stop trying to prove that depth is beautiful or necessary. They simply live, gently, honestly, and quietly. Because in the end, understanding isn't in words, it's in presence. One morning, they open the window and see sunlight slipping through the leaves, hear traffic in the distance, and smell the coffee in the air. Everything is the same, and yet this time, they don't think about it. They just feel it, just breathe, just exist. And in that brief moment, they find the peace they've been searching for all along. They no longer hide from intense emotions. When they're sad, they let themselves be sad. When they're hurt, they allow themselves to ache. But unlike before, they don't analyze it. They don't ask why, don't search for meaning, they simply let it pass. And strangely, when they stop trying to heal, the wounds begin to heal themselves. They start to see that peace doesn't come when the mind stops thinking, but when the heart stops fighting the mind. When both parts no longer compete, but learn to move together, one thinking, one feeling, side by side. Between them, a quiet space opens, the space of balance. Now they can look back at the years that have passed and smile. The sleepless nights, the tangled thoughts, the long stretches of loneliness, all of it helped shape who they are today. A mind that knows how to think, and a heart that knows how to feel. A person who understands that some things aren't meant to be explained, only lived. And perhaps they begin to see that their depth has always been a gift. Because of it, they can notice the beauty others overlook, the last light of day, a bittersweet smile, the way someone's hand brushes a glass of water. They sense life in places most people never reach. The world is still shallow, but they no longer feel lost in it. They don't need validation. They don't need to be understood, because they've learned how to understand themselves. They live slowly, observe deeply, listen quietly, and love, not to be loved back, but because that's how they exist. The peace they've found isn't loud or grand. It comes when they sit still at dusk, hearing their heartbeat blend with the sounds of life. It comes when they realize they don't need to change the world to feel happy, only the way they see it. And when they close their eyes, thoughts still flowing softly through them, they smile. Because now, they no longer wish to stop. They know that some minds were born to feel deeply. And that isn't a burden, it's a gift. A gift for those who are quiet enough to understand that depth was never something to be healed. It was the way they were born to love this world. When they learn to accept their own mind, the world suddenly softens. Not because it has changed, but because they no longer need to understand it. They still think deeply, see beyond the surface, still feel intensely, but now it all feels lighter. Like the sound of rain, still the same rhythm, but no longer noisy, only clear, gentle, and calm. They no longer search for answers in everything. They let the world be what it is, messy, beautiful, imperfect. They stop asking why and start saying it's okay. Because sometimes peace isn't found in meaning, but in accepting that some things don't need meaning at all. They no longer need someone to understand them, need anyone to confirm that they aren't wrong. They only need to feel their own presence. One morning, they look in the mirror and realize they don't have to make themselves easier to understand, because those who truly belong will see their depth without needing an explanation. Perhaps the most beautiful part of the journey for those who think deeply isn't that they find peace, but that they stop running from themselves. They no longer force the mind to be silent or treat their depth as a burden. They begin to smile at unanswered questions, at unnamed emotions, at wounds that haven't yet healed, because they know now all of it belongs to them, the beautiful, the raw, the enough. The world is still noisy. People still talk too much, move too fast, and fear silence. But among it all, they choose to slow down, to listen. Not because they are weak, but because they finally understand. Not every battle needs to be won, and not every question needs to be answered. They start to see beauty in uncertainty, in the way time moves, in change itself, in the things that come and go without a promise to stay. They realize understanding isn't always important. Sometimes simply being here, now, is enough. They are still deep thinkers, but no longer lost ones. They don't need to run from their depth or hide within it. They walk between two worlds, one of noise and one of silence, and they've learned how to live in both. And if you are one of them, someone who thinks too much, feels too much, sees too much, remember this: you are not alone. Somewhere out there, there are minds like yours sitting in the quiet, looking at the night sky, learning how to be at peace with their own depth. You don't have to change to be loved. You just have to stay long enough to realize that you've been lovable all along. Maybe depth was never a curse. Maybe it's a small light shining softly in a shallow world. It doesn't blind, it doesn't demand attention. It simply glows enough to guide those who dare to feel. And if that light lives within you, keep it. Because in a world of surfaces, you are proof that feeling still exists, that understanding still matters, that kindness hasn't vanished. When night falls, their mind still thinks, still asks questions, but this time they're no longer afraid. They let the thoughts pass like the wind, light, real, fleeting. They smile, not because they've found every answer, but because they no longer need them. Perhaps that is true freedom, when you stop trying to understand life and start living it. When you stop fearing your depth and start loving it as part of who you are. Because in the end, those who think deeply were never lost. They were simply the ones still able to see the beauty the rest of the world forgot. And when they close their eyes, even as the thoughts continue to flow, a gentle stillness spreads within. No more questions, no more searching, only the quiet presence of a soul that knows at last everything is okay.